Morning, folks. Black Guy here. Today, now, I did try and get one out yesterday. I did record it. I just wasn't happy with it, so I didn't post it. Now, what I wanted to talk about today is the fact that I, and many people like me, are patriots for a place that doesn't exist. And what I mean by that is that a lot of the overarching narratives that we were raised under are collapsing. And in the spirit of evolving to a more worthwhile and stable society, we can't afford to be stuck in the old paradigms, especially given how many of those paradigms were created for us as a kind of playpen to preserve the power structure. Now, I'm an anti-Marxist, I'm an anti-communist, I'm anti-war, but that doesn't mean that those guys, Engels and Marx, didn't pick up on some threads. I mean, the best lies contain a kernel of truth, don't they? So that's probably why this shit keeps persisting, in spite of the evident failures of the last century. The only so-called communist power left on the planet is the CCP, and I don't think Marx and Engels would recognize that as anything like a communist state in terms of the workers taking the forefront, if that was ever the goal. Happen to think James Lindsay's finally cracked the nut on that. And it was never about what it was selling. So what I wanted to talk about today is what a place would look like that would be worthy of our patriotism. And when I say patriotism, I mean, as I saw a wonderful TED Talk many years ago called Places Worth Dying For. Nobody in their right mind would lay down their life to protect this nation as it stands today, New Zealand as it stands today, Canada as it stands today, or the US or the UK. The rest of Europe can go to hell. That's pretty much a write-off. Now, I don't believe in a lot of the givens that we're fed. Like race, for example. I don't believe in race. I believe that there are different cultures and different families, and they have different histories. But race is something without defined edges. It's a Darwinian era concept. And it's heavily out of date. I think it's only maintained because of, like in a prison, it divides and conquers. And that's the main reason it's perpetuated into today's world. It's just more Alinsky shit. Divide and conquer. Grievance groups. Pit one lot of slaves against the other. Biggest example being this whole idea of whiteness. What the fuck is whiteness? What the fuck is whiteness? I'm a Celt. We only got free of slavery just ahead of the Africans. I mean, in some cases, look at the potato factories. Look at the forced adoptions and all that kind of shit. That persisted until the 1970s in Ireland. This concept of race is so corrosive and stupid. I don't care what color your skin is. I really don't. If we hold common values, our children can share a common future. I really do not care what your phenotype is. I really don't. In fact, if you're proud of your heritage, great. Bring it with. Just don't live it. Be proud of where you're from, but be conscious of where you're at. Let's move forward, not backward. Besides, it's selective. You're only going back a certain way to cling to this myth of your identity. If you go back further, that unravels. Even the UK is made of waves of migration. The Romans, the Welsh, everyone's an arrival in a place like that, even in Australia. The indigenous arrived here at some point. We all come out of that cradle of civilization, as the white man calls it. Whatever you want to call it. I'm not an idiot. I know that the Turkic Empire and the Mongol Empire and the Chinese Empire all enjoyed their time at the top. The Persians, civilization is not a Western monopoly. And occasionally the species is faced with a pinch point about where are we taking this concept of individuality and freedom. You had Magna Carta. You had the bloody French Revolution, which I think is overly glorified and sort of is the origin of the whole left will eat itself guillotine madness that we seem to be still so heavily prone to. But I think the real breakthrough, and the thing that most people fail to appreciate, was actually the American Revolution and the founding fathers and the federalism that they brought about. That's actually really close to the solid foundation of modern human rights. And yeah, it was a bumpy road, and they had slavery, and it wasn't an open democracy at the beginning, and it's not an open democracy now. These systems have always been stacked against the individual for the advantage of the entrenched power base. That's always going to be an ongoing problem. So I'm a patriot for a place that doesn't exist. But I think we need the new breakaway, the new foundation of a new civilization. It doesn't have to be geographically based, and it's already beginning on the internet. There are nations forming of the mind. Michael Malice talks about this a lot. Why isn't it like a phone company? Why can't I subscribe to another model where I live? You subscribe to that model and I subscribe to this model. Your taxes go over there and my taxes go over there. Or maybe no taxes. That would be great. But basically, yeah, I think I believe in the dissolution of nations. I'd like to see a return to city-states. I've been saying for a while now, you can't have a nuclear weapons program without a federal government and an internal revenue service or a tax office. It's just not possible to create these things. And yes, we have billionaires now, but the Bill Gateses and the Steve Jobs of the world didn't get to where they are on their own merit. They captured the government and controlled the regulatory framework to make sure the money went to them and their competition was dust. They exclude themselves from the free market. It's fascism by another name, neo-feudalism, if you will. So this place I want to be patriotic for, it would be much more emphasis on the individual and the human rights angle. Once you've earned your majority, and I don't think it should be something that you simply age into, because chronological age and maturity are becoming more and more divergent in our comfortable modern world. So I think, unfortunately, it keeps coming up, but we're looking at something like a Starship Troopers situation where you have to earn your citizenship through some sort of civic responsibility. I've been telling people for a while now too that my country, my non-existent country that I want to be a part of, the citizenship test would be, how libertarian are you? Pretty much. Do you believe in human rights? Do you believe in the free market? Are you anti-fascist? Are you anti-war? Do you believe that the individual knows best how to tend to their own affairs and how to spend their own money for their own future, plan for their own retirement, etc.? Then you're welcome in our little Ancapistan, our citadel on the hill, our new city-state, whether it be a geographical location or basically a discord group, sharing common values, helping each other develop our ideas, develop our parallel economies, just starve the powers that be of our taxes. I don't want to spend money bombing Russians, bombing Iraqis, bombing Syrians. I'm not interested in any of my hard-earned going to help the military-industrial complex maintain this quasi-feudalist slavery around the world. I think it's... Well, for starters, I came at this originally as an environmentalist and saw these things as wars for oil and a way to maintain what I believed at the time to be a destructive energy system of so-called fossil fuels. And so that's where I was coming from. But, I've developed my ideas since then. And now I just see it as the regulatory framework is what stifles the innovation. And perhaps if big oil hadn't had a stranglehold on the government, alternative energy production, storage, and usage systems would have developed. A big example being electric cars. Electric cars are easy. They could be very simple and very cheap. I've rebuilt 2 children's electric cars for my son, and I don't see why the full-fledged adult versions need to be any more complex. Teslas are not simply electric cars, they're robot cars. That's why they cost so much. But I don't think they need to have self-driving, any of that sort of shit. Just a plain old electric drivetrain would be super efficient. We're getting there with the energy capacity. And there could be other methods developed as well, like hot swappable batteries was one idea to sort of extend the drive time and avoid the need for long recharges or putting in a whole lot of new infrastructure. Basically just a battery exchange system. You pull into the servo, you pull out the flat battery, you put in the full one, you drive off. It would take less time than filling your tank. But again, this regulatory model, small firms can't afford the R&D to do the crash testing and whatnot. So these things don't develop. You won't see a $1,500 plastic electric car. Not that it's impractical or impossible, it's just that it's no good to the model of the powers that be, the entrenched partnerships between big tech, big business, and basically the tax harvesters that are the public service and government. It stifles innovation. We could be so much further along by now. Central planning never works. Decentralize everything. Everything, including defense. We're going to be stuck with this military-industrial complex system as long as we depend upon it to protect us. But I can tell you, like in Australia, for example, we wouldn't last 2 weeks in an invasion. I'm from a military family. I kind of know these things on a deeper level than the average, I guess. I've been concerned about it. I grew up watching the Gulf Wars. My father went to Iraq during the Second Gulf War. So it's been a thing that's been kind of close to home. I've been interested in it for a long time. I've been thinking about how we could move towards a better future for quite some time. Everything's wrong from the top to the bottom. We either dissolve the individual into the collective and nothing's anybody's fault and everybody's just being carried along by the momentum of history, or we go the other way and we have this kind of you touched it last view of justice, where despite everything that's been done to a person or their family via economic fuckery and poor policy decisions and nonsense narratives in the media, And then all of a sudden, the individual who breaks under that strain is held responsible for generations worth of crap. And the truth is somewhere in the middle. People are carried along by the momentum of their lives. But there is the single parent to prison pipeline. And so, how responsible are these individuals given that everyone around them has let a situation develop that was, of course, going to lead to the inevitable? So, we're constantly having to reassess. That's how I got interested in natural law. Yeah. So, I've been thinking a lot about it. And I think basically what we're going to find over the next century, if we survive this great reset, if we survive the imposition of neo-feudalism, it's going to result in some messy conflicts. But I think what will happen is we will see a return to city-states. We will see bands of people join together to fiercely defend what little they've been allowed to have left and take back a little bit more of what was taken from them. It's going to be ugly. It's going to be ugly, but I think it will sear into the human consciousness that whether it's left wing or right wing, the collective is the evil. I mean, the left's always this idea of collective guilt and collective identity. It has a kernel of truth to it, but if you apply it, everything just dissolves and goes to shit. Nobody can take responsibility. Similarly, the other way around, you can't be held responsible for everything that's happened in history. There is a chain of causality. I don't like to think of things as being super deterministic, but they're largely deterministic. The human ability to overcome the deterministic nature of things, that might actually be what makes us human. The ability to mentally create the space for that momentum to pass you by rather than push you along. That might be one of the things that makes us human. And I think we need to think about that a lot. So yeah, I'm a patriot for a place that doesn't yet exist, but I can see it. I can see that shining city on the hill in Kapistan, the libertarian stronghold. Hopefully part of a decentralized network of libertarian strongholds the world over, each with its own quirky little culture, but in a free exchange with other people, other ideas. No one can say what's going to come down the pipe in the future. Not for sure. I think we should be working on 7 billion different approaches. But other people will tell you that no, that has to be regulated. That the human condition needs to be within a certain set of guidelines. And I can just tell you from the little I know, history says that's not going to work. It's really not. People don't understand how human rights have evolved from these struggles. And there's a way to go. Although I think if we actually look at it, a lot of the groundwork has been done. It's just simply ignored. But we're going to learn the lessons of our grandfathers pretty soon. And civilization takes work. But the problem is always men and women, and the solution is always ladies and gentlemen. You have to better yourselves, and you have to better your community, and you have to better the world to pass it to your children. And you have to pass the message too, that the work's never done, that they're going to have to work for their children, and so on, and so on. A lot of people think they've earned their retirement, and I'm here to tell you, you haven't. By and large, it's stolen from your children. You're living on a false economy. And for that reason, I'm slightly accelerationist. I'd like to see it all come down just so it can be rebuilt better. But not centrally. Not by these clowns. The Davos mob. No, it needs to be far more local. Far more local. The vested interests should be the members of the society, not those who seek to profit from it from outside and be untouched and above the law. Yeah, change is coming. So don't be passive, be active. Inform yourself, look at the frameworks, look at the Austrian economics, look at the things that get results. Look at the systems that seem sustainable over the long term, and I don't mean this false climate alarmism type sustainability. I mean sustainable in human terms. What's a system that people can live under that won't constantly need to be pulled down and redesigned and revolted from within? This endless destructive cycle of ferment and chaos. Somewhere between the order and the chaos, there's a life. A good life for all of us. No matter where you're from. It depends on where you're headed. So use that human ability to create that space and really think about what it is that you want for your children. Okay? And you have to want children. If you don't want children, you've been got to. You've been traumatized. It's not just a human thing. Every animal in every species wants to propagate itself. It wants to raise those cubs to adulthood. This is much more basic than the human condition. Yet the powers that be want you neutered and stupid and isolated in a box on the subscription model, and they want to recycle you when you're no longer a viable work unit. They don't want you to save for your retirement. They see all that as theirs. You don't have to get all tinfoil hat and kooky. You can see it. You can see it. You can call it capitalism gone wrong or whatever. But it's happening. So we have to push back. And we have to eliminate from our thinking all this defeatism. Vomit up the black pill. Just like the enemy. Chaos is an opportunity. So keep your eye out for opportunity and use it wisely. Sorry if this is a little incoherent. I do have some show notes here, but I've done it again. Just gone off the rails. So I hope that, you know what? I'm opening up the discussion here. Comment. I've been bad at interacting with the comments, I gotta say, but I will. If anyone's got any ideas or arguments or whatever, just throw them down the bottom there, and I'll read through them. I'll respond either in the comments or maybe even I'll have some content for tomorrow based off what people think. So yeah, that's it for today. Peace, love, and kung fu. Black Eye out. Like, share, subscribe.